I've never been one to believe in fate. In my years of business, I always believed that success came from hard work, strategy, and sheer willpower. But that night, sitting there, quietly sipping on a drink that I had been foolish enough to trust, fate hit me like a freight train. The waiter had placed the glass down in front of me with a polite nod. But I noticed something strange in his eyes. It wasn't fear, but something akin to concern. Maybe he saw the way I looked at Kevin as he handed me the drink, or maybe it was just my imagination. But I could feel something off the moment the cold glass touched my hand. My son, Kevin, had just finished pouring me a fresh drink, his smile wide and innocent. Or at least it seemed that way. The world seemed to stop for a moment. I could hear the clinking of silverware, the distant murmur of conversations, the soft music playing in the background, but none of it mattered. Not anymore. My hand shook ever so slightly as I lifted the glass to my lips, the amber liquid glistening in the dim light of the upscale restaurant. I wasn't thirsty, but I drank anyway. The coolness of the juice slipped down my throat, then the bitterness hit. My stomach lurched as the taste spread across my tongue, something metallic and wrong. My mind screamed, but my body froze. I tried not to show the panic creeping up my throat, but it was hard to keep it hidden. It wasn't the drink that bothered me, it was the sick realization that I had just been poisoned. By my son. I looked up at Kevin, pretending to smile, pretending nothing was wrong. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. But it wasn't concern or care. It was something darker, something cold. His smile seemed too wide, too rehearsed. It felt like I was sitting across from a stranger, not my own flesh and blood. My heart raced as I tried to steady my breathing. My mind was already working overtime, piecing together the puzzle. The way Kevin had poured the drink so carefully, as though he were making sure I didn't see what he was doing. The fact that he had made a point of refilling my glass when I hadn't asked for more. It all made sense now, the whispers behind my back, the coldness in his voice, the way he had been taking more control of my life ever since Alicia died. I'd been too distracted by my own grief to see it. But now, in this moment, everything was clear. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share, your support keeps the stories coming. The waiter, who had been standing nearby, approached me hesitantly. I could see the fear in his eyes now, the way his hands trembled as he spoke. "Sir," he said softly, "I saw him pour something into your drink. I don't know what it was, but I'm sure of it." The world seemed to tilt as those words sank in. My son, Kevin, had tried to kill me. Not just for money, but for control. The realization hit me harder than the drink had. How could I have missed it all this time? The signs had been there, hidden in plain sight. But I had been too trusting, too blinded by my own need for family to see what was happening right in front of me. I tried to stay calm. Tried to act normal, even though my mind was spiraling. This was it. My own son was plotting to kill me. The shock was numbing, but the anger came in waves, crashing over me with a force that I couldn't contain. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and exposed. Kevin's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you okay, Dad?" he asked, his tone too sweet, too concerned. But I could see the glint of something in his eyes. His lips curled ever so slightly into a smile, as though he were waiting for me to fall apart. I nodded slowly, pretending to be unfazed, though every fiber of my being was screaming. "Just a little dizzy," I said, forcing myself to take another sip from the glass, as though nothing were amiss. Kevin's eyes never left mine. He was watching me, studying me, waiting for a reaction. "I think we should go," Brenda, his wife, chimed in, her voice sugary but cold. "You don't look well, Jack." She had always been too perfect, too controlled, never showing a hint of emotion. I had never trusted her, but now, seeing her sitting beside Kevin, her cool composure now seemed like the mask of a predator. I set the glass down, my mind racing. "No," I said quietly, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. Just a little tired. I'm sure it'll pass." I could feel the weight of their gaze on me as I made my decision. I wasn't going to let them see me crack. I wasn't going to show them that I knew what they had done. Not yet. The evening passed in a blur, a haze of laughter and conversation that felt like a distant echo, as though I were watching everything from behind a glass wall. Kevin and Brenda didn't seem worried. In fact, they were both more cheerful than ever. They had no idea that I was already planning my next move. When the waiter came by to clear the table, I stopped him. "How long have you been working here?" I asked, my voice steady but low. "About 2 years, sir," he answered, looking confused. I nodded, my mind working quickly. "I need you to come to my office tomorrow," I said, "to give a statement. You saw my son put something into my drink. It's important that you tell me exactly what you saw." The waiter hesitated for a moment, clearly nervous. But then, he nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll be there." I thanked him and watched as he walked away. A plan was forming in my mind, but I knew it had to be executed with precision. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Kevin and Brenda had thought they could take everything from me, my life, my money, my legacy, but they had no idea what they were dealing with. The drive home was a blur. I could barely concentrate on the road, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Kevin had been scheming for months, maybe longer. The signs were all there now: his sudden interest in my health, his attempts to manipulate my medical decisions, his increasing control over my business. But this was different. This was more than just greed. This was something darker, something that went deeper than I had ever imagined. I had built my empire from the ground up. Alicia and I had worked tirelessly, day in and day out, to create a life of success and meaning. And now, it seemed, the very people I had trusted the most, my own son and his wife, were plotting to destroy everything we had built. They weren't just after my money. They wanted control. They wanted power. And they were willing to kill me to get it. When I finally stepped through the door of my home, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. But it wasn't the kind of tiredness that comes from a long day's work. It was the deep, bone-weary tiredness of betrayal. I had been living in a lie. And now, I had to face the truth. My son was no longer my son. He was a monster in disguise. I made my way to my office, the one place in the house where I could think clearly. I locked the door behind me and sat down at my desk. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. Kevin and Brenda had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. They had made me their enemy, and now, I would make them regret it, but I knew this was just the beginning. I couldn't act rashly. I had to be smart. I had to gather evidence, lay my traps carefully. I had to outsmart them. And I would. The night was still, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the burning fire of resolve deep within me. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to die the way they wanted me to. I would protect my legacy, and I would make sure they paid for what they had done. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was too busy unraveling the threads of my son's treachery, each one leading to something darker than I had imagined. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kevin's face, the smile that had seemed so innocent earlier now twisted in my mind into something sinister. I had trusted him. I had raised him, given him everything he could ever want. And this was how he repaid me? It was early morning when I made the call. Cynthia, my lawyer and friend, picked up on the second ring. She had always been sharp, always a step ahead of me, but this time, I could sense she was already bracing for bad news. Jack. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. She knew. She must have sensed the shift in me. Meet me at my office, I said. We have a problem. I didn't waste any time. I knew exactly what I had to do. I'd never been a passive man. Throughout my life, when things went wrong, I acted. And now, I was facing the worst betrayal imaginable. I had been a fool to think my son would ever stand by me the way I stood by him. But now, I had to do what I'd avoided for so long. I had to confront Kevin. I arranged the meeting with Cynthia in my office, a sleek, modern space filled with expensive furniture and framed memories of my business triumphs. But today, it felt cold, sterile, as if the very walls were closing in on me. Cynthia arrived shortly after I did, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she walked in with her usual no-nonsense attitude. She was in her mid-40s, with sharp features and an even sharper mind. She'd always been more than a lawyer to me. She had been an anchor in a sea of uncertainty, helping me navigate the complexities of my business and personal life. But even Cynthia couldn't shield me from this. She closed the door behind her, her gaze already scanning my face for any sign of the storm brewing inside me. "What's going on, Jack?" she asked, taking a seat across from me. "I think my son just tried to kill me," I said bluntly, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling in my chest. Cynthia's face didn't change, but I could see the shift in her eyes: concern, wariness, and something else. She was always professional, but this was different. This wasn't a business deal or a legal dispute. This was personal. "You're sure?" she asked, leaning forward. I told her everything: the drink, the waiter's confession, the sick realization that Kevin had poisoned me. I described the way he had acted, how he had been so careful to hide his intentions. But what shook me most was what I had uncovered. In the days following the dinner, the deeper layers of Kevin's betrayal. The forged medical power of attorney, the plans to control my health, the subtle manipulation that had been going on for months. It wasn't just about money. It was about control, about power. He had been preparing for this moment for far too long. Cynthia listened, her face inscrutable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her fingers tapping against the surface of the desk as she thought. "Kevin has been methodical," she said finally, her voice low. "This wasn't impulsive. He's had this planned out. For a while." I nodded, my jaw tightening. "That's what I've been thinking. It's not just greed. He's doing this to take everything from me: my health, my business, my legacy. It's all part of a bigger scheme." Cynthia leaned back in her chair, her gaze narrowing as she processed the information. "You need proof, Jack. This isn't enough. The drink, the waiter's testimony, it's circumstantial. We need something concrete, something that will destroy any doubt in their minds. Without that, Kevin and Brenda will walk away from this. And they'll do it with their heads held high. I felt a chill run down my spine. She was right. As much as I wanted to believe the evidence I had was enough, I knew better. Kevin was too smart, too well prepared. He wouldn't leave a trail unless he had a way to cover it up. But I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I had spent years building my life, my fortune, my legacy, and I wasn't about to let my own flesh and blood steal it all away. I'll get what I need, I said, my voice steady but filled with determination. But I need your help, Cynthia. I need to be ahead of him. She gave me a look of understanding. I'll start making some calls. We'll need to dig into Kevin's finances, his medical records, anything that shows a pattern. But this is going to be delicate. One wrong move, and they'll know we're onto them. I don't care, I said, my voice rising slightly. He's crossed the line, Cynthia. He's tried to kill me. And now, I'm going to make him pay. She met my gaze, her eyes hardening. We'll get him, Jack. You're not alone in this. I knew that she meant it, but as I looked around the room, the weight of what I was about to do settled in. Kevin wasn't just my son anymore. He was my enemy. And to stop him, I would have to be ruthless. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and research. Cynthia and I worked in tandem, pulling strings and making connections, digging deeper into Kevin's life than I had ever imagined. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always one step ahead of me, watching me from the shadows, waiting for me to make a move. But I was no longer the passive father he thought I was. I was his adversary now that I hired private investigators to look into Kevin's financial records. What we found was unsettling, though not entirely surprising. There were large, unexplained withdrawals from his accounts, payments to shady individuals, nothing that could be directly tied to the poisoning attempt, but enough to raise suspicions. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Kevin's plan was well thought out. He wasn't just interested in the money, he was trying to wipe the slate clean, to take control of everything Alicia and I had worked so hard to build. One afternoon, as I was poring over the documents Cynthia had sent over, a thought struck me. There had to be more. Kevin wouldn't just rely on a simple poison, he had been researching heart attacks, trying to find a way to make it look natural. There was a dark kind of precision in his approach that terrified me. It wasn't just about getting rid of me. It was about erasing everything I stood for. It was about rewriting the past. I ran a quick search of Kevin's browsing history on the computer, and there it was, searches for heart attack-inducing drugs, methods to make someone's death appear natural, even how to manipulate medical tests. My stomach churned as I read through the results, each click bringing me closer to the grim realization that my son had been planning my murder for months. He wasn't just going to let me die. He wanted to make sure no one would suspect foul play. I felt the ground slip out from under me as the full scope of his betrayal sank in. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not while I still had breath in my body. I called Cynthia immediately. We have to act fast, I said, my voice tight with urgency. I've got proof. I know exactly what he's been doing. Good, Cynthia replied, her voice sharp. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and Kevin will know we're onto him. We'll need to catch him in the act. I sat back in my chair, staring at the computer screen. It was time to turn the tables. The first time I saw Kevin after uncovering his full betrayal, I felt the familiar ache of heartbreak, but now it was twisted with something far sharper, rage. We were at the Callahan estate for a family dinner. The kind of event where facades are polished to perfection. Kevin and Brenda were smiling, serving up their usual charm to the dozen or so guests milling around the grand dining hall. The chandeliers glimmered, casting sparkling reflections off the polished silverware, as if mocking me. I felt as though I was watching a play, one I had once believed in, only now the actors were villains wearing the masks of family. I kept my composure, but inside, my mind raced. Each laugh, each clink of glasses, felt like a countdown to something explosive. Cynthia had advised patience. The more they thought I was unaware, the stronger our hand would be. I watched Kevin. His posture relaxed, the mask of filial duty so perfectly in place. He didn't know I'd seen the browsing history. He didn't know I had the toxicology reports, the forged medical papers, the evidence of debts and lies neatly stacked in Cynthia's files. He thought he had control, but he was about to learn otherwise. As the evening progressed, I noticed subtle things that confirmed my fears. Kevin's hand lingered too long near the bottle of wine I had ordered specially, the one he had offered to pour for me. My pulse quickened. The memory of the security guard's words flashed through my mind. I saw him pour something into your juice. Every nerve in my body screamed. But I did nothing, pretending to sip slowly, feigning the calm of a man who had no idea of the danger surrounding him. Dinner continued, a slow dance of conversation, laughter, and polite toasts. But inside, I was calculating, watching. I noticed Brenda subtly glance toward the dessert tray, her eyes darting, searching for some opportunity. It struck me then how methodical they had been, how deeply they had believed they could manipulate every moment. It was almost impressive, in a terrifying way. Almost, after dessert, Cynthia arrived, dressed elegantly, but her presence carried weight. She joined me at the side table, her eyes meeting mine briefly. That glance said everything: it's time. Kevin and Brenda had no idea what was coming. The net had been set, and the trap was about to spring. I felt the adrenaline mix with an almost poetic satisfaction, the calm before the storm. Where years of silent planning and careful observation would finally pay off. I signaled Cynthia to hand over the first document, the forged medical power of attorney. I made sure to leave it in plain sight, letting it accidentally slide from my briefcase. Kevin's hand twitched, just slightly, as he noticed it. Brenda's smile faltered for the first time that evening, subtle enough to be missed by others but crystal clear to me. That tiny crack in their armor ignited something fierce inside me, a validation of every sleepless night, every calculated move I had made since discovering their treachery. Then came the piece de resistance. Cynthia, with perfect timing, stood and requested the attention of everyone in the room. "I have something urgent to announce," she said, her voice ringing clear across the hall. The room fell silent. Kevin and Brenda froze, realizing the shift in atmosphere, the weight of impending exposure. "This concerns the Callahan estate," Cynthia continued, her gaze briefly locking with Kevin's, unflinching. "After a thorough review of all legal and financial matters, as well as evidence submitted regarding recent activities within this household, the estate has been redirected." A murmur spread through the guests. I could see Kevin's jaw tighten. Brenda's eyes widened, and for the first time, there was no mask, no calculated smile, just raw panic. Cynthia continued, presenting the toxicology report, the detailed evidence of forged documents, and the undeniable proof of debts and secret accounts they had tried to hide. Every piece of paper was like a hammer striking down years of their deceit, and each strike brought me a deep, almost vengeful satisfaction. And then, the final blow, the revelation of the charitable trust. "The estate, totaling $58 million, Cynthia said, has been transferred in full to the Alicia Callahan Foundation, honoring the late Mrs. Callahan's legacy and ensuring her lifelong vision is preserved. Kevin and Brenda Callahan have voluntarily relinquished all claims." The room was stunned. Gasps, whispers, wide eyes. Kevin's face twisted, a mixture of disbelief and fury. Brenda was pale, trembling, the picture of humiliation. I sat back, letting the weight of the moment settle over the room. They had expected greed to win, betrayal to go unnoticed. Instead, the universe, or perhaps my own careful orchestration, had dealt them a crushing defeat. Their public humiliation was complete, witnessed by friends, colleagues, and family who had once looked to them with admiration. Now, they were nothing. Shadows of ambition, gone in a single, decisive strike. As the night wound down, I found myself wandering through the gallery funded by the foundation, reflecting on what had transpired. Paintings and sculptures created by young, gifted artists filled the space, each a testament to human resilience and creativity. For the first time in weeks, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Kevin and Brenda were gone, my wealth and legacy secured, but it was more than that. The foundation was more than a repository of money. It was a living, breathing extension of Alicia's spirit, a symbol of what truly mattered. I realized then that revenge had been only the surface. The deeper satisfaction, the lasting triumph, came from transforming betrayal into purpose. The seeds of greed my son had tried to plant had instead blossomed into opportunity, hope, and a chance to shape the world positively. And as I stood there, surrounded by the fruits of my careful planning and silent effort, I understood something profound. True legacy wasn't wealth or power. It was the life and dreams you nurtured, the people you helped, and the memories you honored. Kevin and Brenda would be forced to live with their failure, a constant reminder of their own ambition and the emptiness it brought. Meanwhile, through the foundation, I had turned the darkest betrayal imaginable into something beautiful. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe, knowing that even in a world full of deception and greed, purpose and integrity could still triumph. This section expands the climax. Public humiliation, emotional payoff, and inspirational ending while maintaining a cinematic, slow-burn narrative. Even after Kevin and Brenda walked away, leaving the estate behind and their ambitions in ruins, the echo of betrayal lingered. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it settle, heavy and deliberate, in the grand halls of the Callahan estate. Every corner of the house carried a memory: Alicia's laughter in the sunlit drawing room, her soft hum while tending the garden, the warmth of her hand on mine. And yet, the same walls had also witnessed deceit and greed, plotting in shadows, smiles that hid venom. I realized then that the house itself had become a silent witness to the transformation of grief into resolve, despair into purpose. The foundation, named for Alicia, became my sanctuary and my battlefield. Each day I walked through the gallery, greeting young artists and witnessing their raw talent. I felt a pulse of life that was stronger than any resentment or sorrow. Every canvas, every sculpture, every note played in the foundation's small recital hall reminded me that legacy wasn't inheritance, it was the chance to lift others when life had tried to crush them. Alicia had believed in nurturing potential over hoarding wealth, and through this trust, I was finally living that philosophy. I wasn't blind to the fact that my son's betrayal had scarred me. Late at night, I would replay moments, the casual glance Kevin gave when he thought I wouldn't notice, the calculated charm Brenda wielded like a weapon, the subtle tension in their voices when they thought no one else could hear. I felt rage, yes, and a sense of bitter loss, but it was accompanied by clarity. I understood human nature in a way I hadn't before. I knew how greed could twist the heart, how ambition could blind a child to the love of a parent, how deception could hide behind even the most familiar faces. But more importantly, I understood that my actions, measured, patient, deliberate, had the power to transform betrayal into triumph. Cynthia remained at my side, not just as a lawyer but as a confidant, guiding me through the delicate intricacies of managing a foundation while fending off legal maneuvering from lingering opportunists. She often said, "You've done more than protect yourself, Maya. You've created a legacy that will outlive every attempt at destruction." And she was right. The gallery was filled with life now, students eager to learn, artists brimming with ideas, the community slowly recognizing the foundation as a beacon of hope. The house that had once been a stage for deceit now thrummed with energy, growth, and the subtle satisfaction of victory without malice. One afternoon, I received a call from a young painter, barely out of college, who had been struggling to find space to display her work. Her voice trembled with emotion as she thanked me, explaining how the foundation had given her not only recognition but faith in her talent. In that moment, the memories of Kevin's betrayal, the forged documents, the malicious plans, the very real danger I had been in, felt like distant shadows. Every sleepless night, every careful observation, every moment of doubt had led to this, life transformed into something meaningful, purposeful, and lasting. It wasn't just about wealth anymore. It was about influence, guidance, and creating opportunities for others. Kevin and Brenda, I realized, had only revealed the depth of their own emptiness. They had tried to harness my life, to bend it to their desires, and in failing, they had left behind a void I could fill with something far more enduring. And so, I poured myself into the foundation, traveling to schools, hosting exhibitions, funding mentorship programs, and celebrating the triumphs of those who had once been invisible. Months later, as I walked through a gallery opening showcasing the latest collection funded entirely by the foundation, I paused in the center of the room. The walls were alive with color, the air buzzing with creativity. I thought of Alicia, of her belief in the good that could be nurtured in others. I realized that the true revenge, the kind that outlasts anger, was the creation of a life so vibrant that betrayal itself seemed impotent in comparison. The memory of Kevin and Brenda's greed lingered, yes, but it no longer had power over me. I had turned a family's darkest act into an enduring force for good, and then, a young man approached me, one of the first beneficiaries of the foundation, and handed me a painting he had made, a depiction of a phoenix rising from ashes. He said, "You gave me a second chance when I thought all doors were closed. This is for you." I held it in my hands, feeling its energy, its story, and I understood fully, the legacy of the Callahans wasn't in wealth, nor in revenge. It was in hope, opportunity, and the courage to rise above betrayal. That night, I sat in my study, looking out over the estate, moonlight spilling across the gardens Alicia had loved. The estate, once a silent accomplice to greed, now seemed to breathe with life and promise. I thought about Kevin and Brenda, and for the first time, I felt nothing but clarity. They had tried to take everything, but in doing so, they had allowed me to create something far greater. I whispered her name softly, "Alicia? We did it." And I knew she would have smiled. I had taken the pain, the fear, the betrayal, and transformed it into beauty, opportunity, and lasting impact. The estate was no longer just a house, it was a symbol of resilience. The foundation was no longer just a trust, it was proof that darkness could be transformed into light. And me? I was no longer just a victim. I was a guardian of legacy, a silent victor, and finally, at peace. The story didn't end with vengeance or wealth, it ended with purpose. The kind of satisfaction that reverberates through lives, generations, and dreams. Kevin and Brenda would always exist in the shadow of their own failure, while the foundation, the gallery, and every young artist whose life had been touched would carry forward a story far greater than greed, betrayal, or loss.